Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another local breaking reporting video analysis update. Let's get into our morning report by NPR for the morning of Sunday, November 16, 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and enjoy. Let's get into it.
Hey, NPR listeners. Each year, NPR invites students from around the country to submit their audio stories to NPR's Student Podcast Challenge. Click to learn more and listen to stories from recent winners. Support for NPR and the Student Podcast Challenge come from Progressive Insurance. Get a quote online at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. The federal government is gearing up for its first full week of work following the end of the shutdown. But the president is facing pressure on a number of issues, one of them being affordability. Traveling on Air Force One, he explained his decision to lift tariffs on a number of items.
We just had a little bit of a rollback on some foods, like coffee, as an example, where the prices of coffee were a little bit high. Now they'll be on the low side in a very short period of time.
So where does this leave the president's signature economic policy? Joining me now to discuss that and much more is NPR senior political correspondent Mara Liasson. Good morning, Mara.
Good morning, Aisha.
So President Trump's appeared, maybe a little bit more defensive in the last few days. What's behind that?
What's behind it is his dropping poll numbers and his party's poor performance in the off-year elections. And he is trying to address this affordability issue. He's throwing some of his tariffs overboard. He announced on Friday he's scrapping U.S. tariffs on beef and coffee, tomatoes, some fruit. And this is a big backpedal for him. He's not stopping at tariffs. He is floating the idea of sending Americans rebate checks of $2,000 to buy health care. He's floated the idea of a 50-year mortgage. He's started an investigation into meatpacking plants. Recently, he signed a deal with drug companies to lower the price of obesity drugs. So this is a very big turnaround for a president who until recently was saying polls that showed voters' concerns about the cost of living were fake. He said the economy has been great, it's booming, inflation was down. Now he seems to be acknowledging that prices are up and that his own tariffs are making these prices higher. This is a big reversal.
Well, a lot of these economic issues kind of feel a little bit like deja vu, right?
Well, they're very similar to the problem that President Biden faced. Affordability was one of the big reasons Democrats lost in 2024. Biden kept on saying, just like Trump was, inflation is down, the economy is good, but that's not how voters felt. They don't care about the rate of inflation. Voters care about prices, whether they're higher or lower, and mostly they're higher. And voters who are struggling with affordability feel like politicians who tell them the economy is great are insulting them. And it certainly didn't work for Biden, and it's a big challenge for Trump. Because with affordability, you can't just post your way or tweet your way out of it. You actually have to deliver, and that's hard.
Now, the government has reopened, and many federal workers are, breathing a sigh of relief. But politically, how do you think the shutdown played out for the two parties?
Well, one thing it did for Democrats was unite them in anger and frustration at Chuck Schumer, the minority leader in the Senate who couldn't keep his party together. Democrats are angry at the 8 Democratic senators who broke ranks and voted with Republicans to end the shutdown. They feel it was too soon, particularly after their triumph in the off-year elections. But the funding bill only goes till the end of January, so we'll get to do this again in a couple of months. And the other thing Democrats feel is a silver lining for them is they did get a vote on health care next month. Republican senators will get the choice to join with Democrats and extend the Affordable Care, Obamacare tax credit subsidies or not. Democrats feel they are on the right side politically of this issue, and they think they're going to put some pressure on Republicans.
And Jeffrey Epstein is the scandal that just refuses to go away. House Speaker Mike Johnson said he put forward a bill this week that would compel the Department of Justice to release the complete Jeffrey Epstein files. What does all of this mean for the president?
Well, it means that this is an issue that's not going away, although Trump would very much like it to. The vote in the House was forced by what's called a discharge position. 4 Republicans joined Democrats to circumvent the leadership and bring this bill to the floor, even though Speaker Johnson didn't want it there. This week, the House Oversight Committee released more than 20,000 documents related to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, including some emails from Epstein mentioning President Trump, but none of those emails were more incriminating than showing that Trump might have known more about Epstein than he has said he did. Trump is now trying to turn the tables. He's ordered Attorney General Pam Bondi to investigate Jeffrey Epstein's ties to Democrats, including former President Bill Clinton.
Well, and finally, Mara, just an official told NPR the table is being set for possible military action in Venezuela. What more do we know?
What we know from NPR's reporting is that the world's largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford, will arrive in the Northern Caribbean today. And it remains unclear if President Trump will actually use military force against Venezuela. He told reporters on Air Force One, quote, "I sort of made up my mind," unquote, about whether to launch an attack. But he also said, "I can't tell you what I've decided." So that's something to watch.
That's NPR senior national political correspondent Mara Liasson. Thank you so much, Mara.
You're welcome.
Host Saudi Arabia's crown prince this week. There will be a formal White House dinner for Mohammed bin Salman. U.S. intelligence linked MBS, as he's also known, to the killing of a Saudi Washington Post columnist in 2018. That's just one example human rights critics of the kingdom point to. When he last met Trump in May, the Crown Prince promised $600 billion worth of Saudi investments. Yasmin Farouk is the project director for the Gulf and Arabian Peninsula at International Crisis Group. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, how would you describe the current state of U.S.-Saudi relations?
Well, I think both sides are banking a lot on the personal rapport between the two leaders. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and President Trump are two people who put business and economic and trade relations first, and economic growth, of course, in the case of the United States, as top priority in the bilateral relationship. And in that sense, they understand each other, they speak the same language, and so they get along, and it allows them to drive the conversation later into politics. They also speak the same language when it comes to conflicts and regional security in the Middle East, in the sense that they want to stop wars. They want the region to move from insecurity to prosperity, even if they differ on the path to take in order to reach that regional stability and prosperity.
What are the main points of tension between the two countries? What are the challenges?
Saudi Arabia was very worried by the U.S. support to Israel over the past 2 years. Although the three countries, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the U.S., agreed on the end goals of, defeating the proxies of Iran in the region, Saudi Arabia didn't necessarily think that such a high-intensity conflict in Gaza should have been supported by the U.S. Saudi Arabia thinks that in addition to the use of force, there must be negotiations, there must be diplomacy, but they differ, for example, on who's going to govern Gaza in the transition period. They differ on the time frame of Israeli occupation of Gaza. You have other differences, for example, on dealing with Iran, where Saudi Arabia is worried that the United States is not going to keep Israel in check and that there will be a new round of war in the region and Saudi Arabia could become a target. I would say that the Trump administration has shown that it is willing and capable to use force. Saudi Arabia would like it to use diplomacy with the same energy and with the same heavy-handed, if I might say.
Talk to me about the diplomacy, because obviously the U.S. helped Israel and Saudi Arabia come very close to normalizing relations. Those plans were thwarted by the Hamas-led attacks on Israel on October 7th, 2023. Could normalizing be back on the table now with Trump back in office?
Saudi Arabia kept normalization on the table, but kept it as long as it will be linked to a pathway to a Palestinian state. And that's because Saudi Arabia believes that there needs to be a solution once and for all. It was Israel first that said that it refuses any kind of concession that would lead to a Palestinian state, and that if this is the Saudi condition, then normalization will not happen. And to go back to your questions, the details of that solution are where US and Saudi Arabia may differ. And I am sure that this will be discussed during the Crown Prince's visit.
So, one point of contention in the relationship between the two countries historically has been over human rights. And that was definitely one of the points of tension with President Biden. How do human rights factor in with President Trump, or do they factor in?
I think President Trump made it very clear when he came to Riyadh that he respects the separation between the domestic and foreign policy realms when it comes to other countries. And him and his envoys have been repeating this, saying, we will not tell countries how to govern their people. So I don't think, or I'm actually pretty sure, that human rights and domestic politics inside Saudi Arabia will not be on the agenda.
That was Yasmin Farouk, Project Director for the Gulf and Arabian Peninsula at International Crisis Group. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This message comes from Dignity Memorial and Memphis Funeral Home, one of their nationwide providers. When Bill Muir's wife Barbara passed away earlier this year, he knew he wanted a celebration of life that captured everything that made her unique. Click the play button to hear Bill's conversation with funeral director Mike Perry and learn about the details in her celebration that brought joy to her family and friends. Now, it may be a little early to talk about Christmas, but I like to be organized, and that means thinking about my tree. According to a survey by the American Christmas Tree Association, more than 80% of households planning to put up a tree this year opt for an artificial one. But those trees, once seen as the cheaper, more convenient option, are getting more expensive as tariffs and higher production costs drive up prices. Mac Harmon is the founder and CEO of Balsam Hill, which manufactures artificial Christmas trees, and he joins us now. Welcome to the program.
It's great to be here.
Let's just start by comparing prices. And this is important to me because I'm going to be buying a new artificial Christmas tree this year. How much did an artificial Christmas tree cost this time last year versus now? And I'm talking about for the average tree, not some huge, massive thing.
What we've seen this year in the market is that prices have gone up about 10 to 15%, looking across the different retailers.
And so help us understand, what part of production is most affected by tariffs?
In the Christmas industry, 90% of Christmas decorations have been made in China historically. Because the products are made in Asia, there's really not been any increase in the manufacturing costs. It's just in the tariffs that we pay to the US government to bring those goods into the United States.
Could you move your production here so you wouldn't have that?
We do source some products, not Christmas trees, but other Christmas products in the US. And that has been affected as well because our suppliers in the US purchase component parts overseas, and those have been tariffed. So the prices have gone up no matter if we make something here or we make it other places. That said, specific to China, we have been working over the last 5 or 6 years to diversify our supply chain and get outside of China. We've manufactured Christmas trees in Mexico. We've manufactured them in Indonesia and other places in Southeast Asia. But all of those places have been tariffed.
Okay. I know you said that even manufacturing here, you still have to deal with the component costs. Is there something specific about Christmas trees why you wouldn't look to manufacture them in the U.S.?
Yeah, the interesting thing about pre-lit artificial Christmas trees is they've actually never been made in the US. And the reason for that is because it's a really painstaking process, and we do it by using zip ties and clips and making sure the bulbs stick upright so they look great. And so back over 30 years ago, when unlit trees were made in the United States, someone had this great idea to pre-light the trees. The American workers, even 30 years ago, were like, no way, I am not doing this. I just think it's very unlikely that something that's almost like basket weaving is a trade that's going to move from a lower wage, lower cost of living country to the United States for the first time.
Some companies have tried to eat the tariff cost, while others feel they have no choice but to raise prices. Has Balsam Hill done anything to try to combat raising its prices?
We have done so many things to try and keep the prices as low as possible. And so, unfortunately, we did do a reduction in force. We stopped a bunch of growth projects and reduced our hiring. We froze raises. So, there's all sorts of things we did to reduce our expenses. We also negotiated with our suppliers and asked them to shoulder some of the cost of the tariffs. And then the biggest thing we were able to do was we brought in a lot of our product for Christmas 25 before the tariffs took effect or before higher tariffs took effect. That's not going to be a tool that's available to us for Christmas 2026. But for this year, as soon as President Trump won the election, we shipped as many products as we could between November and January 20th, Inauguration Day, because there was a lot of discussion that there was going to be a day one tariff.
What's your advice for families who want to get the most value out of their artificial Christmas tree this year?
I think the best idea is to look for a tree that you love. And if you find it, it's on some kind of sale, I would buy it. I would not wait because I think we are going to see a shortage. Most retailers cut back the number of trees across the industry. The American Christmas Tree Association believes that 15% fewer trees were purchased this year by retailers than last year, and demand is generally pretty steady. With 15% fewer trees, I do think we're going to have reduced choice later in the season. I think kind of waiting and seeing if you might get 10% off if you wait 2 weeks, I don't think that's going to work as well this year as it might in a normal year.
That's Mac Harmon, CEO of Balsam Hill. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's a pleasure.
Employees went back to work last week following the end of the government shutdown. But just hours later, one government scientist was told she was being put on leave until further notice. She believes it's retaliation for her criticism of President Trump. NPR's Andrea Shue reports.
The morning after Congress voted to reopen the government, Jenna Norton returned to work at the National Institutes of Health.
At 7:15 at my normal time.
She had a team meeting, caught up on some emails, and then just after 2, a notice arrived from HR informing her that she was being put on paid leave, not for any disciplinary purpose, the notice said, but Norton strongly believes otherwise. She went on TikTok to explain.
I strongly suspect it is because I have been speaking up in my personal capacity about the harms that I've been witnessing inside the National Institutes of Health.
Norton has been at NIH for more than a decade. She's been deeply alarmed by the funding cuts and the mass firings of staff at the agency this year. In public statements and media interviews, she warned that the Trump administration was politicizing research and canceling studies, putting the health of participants at risk. She spoke to NPR just after the shutdown began.
I feel like I have this front row seat to the destruction of our democracy. You know, we are seeing it in real time with a president who is asking us to do things that are illegal and harmful to the American public.
The Department of Health and Human Services, which oversees NIH, did not respond to NPR's questions about why Norton was placed on leave, and instead issued a statement calling her a radical leftist. Now, there are a number of other civil servants who have likewise been sidelined after speaking out. 2 government attorneys who enforced fair housing laws got termination notices after raising the alarm about the dismantling of their work. An agriculture department worker is on leave facing termination after warning about disruptions to food assistance programs during the shutdown. Speaking on Friday, Jenna Norton says she knew she might face consequences eventually.
I was not totally caught off guard, but at the same time, I did not expect it to happen yesterday.
Now, Norton believes her speech is protected under the First Amendment. She points to a 1968 Supreme Court decision that found public employees can speak on matters of public concern as long as it doesn't disrupt government operations. She also knows federal employees have whistleblower rights. Still, she says she was never under the impression that her rights would be respected, given the tactics the Trump administration has used to shrink the government. But
I also recognized that if you don't assert your rights because you're afraid or because you're demoralized or for whatever reason, then you've already given them up. You've let them be taken away.
Something Jenna Norton says she's determined not to do. Andrea Hsu, NPR News.
California is no stranger to extreme weather. This weekend, the state was hit by a huge storm system, forcing evacuations. It's these type of weather events and wildfires in particular that are driving up the prices of home insurance. That's especially true in Northern California's Lake County, where many companies are just canceling policies. Now, community leaders are working to reduce the risks from wildfires. But as Lauren Summer from NPR's Climate Desk reports, many of the insurance companies aren't taking note.
Penny Sidhu is getting a home makeover, which she feels like she won out of the blue.
I have no words. I'm just like shocked.
But it's not a makeover you'd notice, standing in her front yard in Kelseyville, California, surrounded by rolling hills.
The screens on top of the gutters. So now I have new gutters with screens on them so the debris can't get in.
Sidhu's house has been made over to protect against wildfires. She's part of a new California program to make homes less likely to burn. After evacuating from fires 3 times in the last 9 years, Sidhu got concerned about overgrown brush between her and her neighbor's house.
You couldn't even see her roof. It was like our houses were connected. There was huge trees and bushes.
She found out she was eligible for the Lake County Home Hardening Program, which uses state and federal funding. Deanna Fernway, the program manager, set up an inspection to look for vulnerabilities, like those bushes.
So if those were to combust, it would catch both of their roofs on fire. And so we removed all of the vegetation.
It's about protecting the house from embers, tiny bits of burning debris carried by the wind far from a wildfire itself.
More than 90% of homes catch on fire due to embers, not direct flame. So that is what we highly focus on.
Fernway's team removed the bark mulch near the walls of Sidhu's house and put in gravel. She'll get a metal gate in her side yard instead of wood.
I would never have been able to afford this. There's just no way I could do it. Especially I'm by myself. There's just no way.
Many of Sidhu's neighbors are in the same boat. The county has a lot of lower income households. But some have gotten wildfire improvements too because the state program is focused on this neighborhood. Wildfire risk goes way down when many homes participate together. Sidhu hopes that insurance companies will notice that.
People are having such a hard time getting insurance on their houses right now. My daughter just bought a house in Crescent City and it was a nightmare to get insurance.
But there are no guarantees that companies will keep insuring Sidhu and her neighbors.
This insurance crisis is hitting everywhere.
Jessica Paiska is on the Lake County Board of Supervisors. She says in the last decade, about 70% of Lake County has burned. She lost her own home in 2015. And insurance has become a huge problem. Some residents are seeing rates double or are being dropped by their insurance companies.
I know a lot of people that are just going without insurance right now.
Paiska says the county is trying to reduce the wildfire risk with a range of projects. They've improved evacuation routes. They worked with federal and state agencies to reduce flammable vegetation in the forests around them. And there's the home improvement program.
People are trying to do everything that they possibly can to get their rates lower, but it's really not helping much.
Some insurance companies are offering small discounts, 5 or 10%, for homeowners that make their houses safer. But companies don't have to consider the work a whole community does to reduce their risk.
How do we get to the point where the insurers are saying there's a much lower risk here, community-wide, we'll come back and we'll lower the rates, or maybe not raise the rates quite so much.
That problem comes down to information. Nancy Watkins is a consulting actuary with Milliman, a risk analysis firm.
To really understand if the risk has been reduced, an insurance company would theoretically need information about what my neighbors had done. That's very difficult for an insurance company to know about or to verify.
It's something Watkins is trying to change. She's helping start the Wildland Urban Interface Data Commons. It would aggregate all the community wildfire projects into a big database, one that insurance companies can use to see where the wildfire risk is getting better. She says there's a lot to figure out about how it will work, like protecting consumer privacy and getting insurance companies on board. But it could help those companies provide discounts where they don't right now.
As long as there's a disconnect between what people and communities do to reduce their risk and what they're experiencing from their insurance companies. If that disconnect persists, there's this bias to do nothing. People think nothing that I do will matter.
Insurance is a key motivation, she says, for incentivizing fire prone communities to prevent disasters.